The last box hit the sidewalk with a dull thud, dust puffing up around it like a sad little cloud. I stood there on the front walkway, staring at the house I'd called home for 32 years. My home. The one Harold and I had saved for, painted, ourselves, raised our son in. Now Thomas stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression cold as January steel. Behind him, Vanessa hovered, her manicured hand resting possessively on his shoulder. "That's everything, Mom," Thomas said, not meeting my eyes. "The moving truck should be here soon for the furniture. We'll have them deliver it to your new place." My new place. A tiny one-bedroom apartment in Sunnyside complex that Thomas had hastily arranged, from a 4-bedroom family home to a box barely bigger than our garden shed. And all because Vanessa wanted to make the house her own. I nodded, not trusting my voice. What could I say? That my heart was shattering into pieces so small I'd never find them all? That the betrayal from my only child burned worse than the time I accidentally grabbed a hot pan without oven mitts? I was 60 years old, suddenly homeless, and the worst part was knowing my son, the same boy I'd nursed through chickenpox and taught to ride a bike, was the one showing me the door. "Grandma?" A small voice broke through my thoughts. Lucas, my 10-year-old grandson, stood in the doorway, partially hidden behind his father. His eyes were red-rimmed, lower lip trembling. "Do you really have to go?" Before I could answer, Vanessa stepped forward. "Lucas, honey, we talked about this. Grandma will be much happier in her new apartment, and you can visit whenever you want." The smile she offered didn't reach her eyes. I know that was a lie. I would never be happier away from my home, away from Lucas. But I forced a smile anyway. "It's okay, sweetheart. Change is part of life." I held out my arms, and he ran into them, burying his face against my cardigan. I breathed in the scent of his hair, the same shampoo I always bought him, despite Vanessa's preference for some expensive organic brand. "I made you something," he whispered, pressing a folded paper into my hand. "Don't look now. Look later." I nodded, slipping it into my pocket. "I love you, Lucas. That won't ever change." "Mom, the car is waiting," Thomas called out, checking his watch. Always in a hurry these days. Ever since he'd made partner at his law firm and married Vanessa, time had become his enemy. I gave Lucas one final squeeze before letting go. Walking to the waiting taxi felt like moving through molasses. Each step away from my home, my garden, my memories, was agony. And yet, as I settled into the back seat and gave the driver the address, to Sunnyside Apartments, a strange calm washed over me. Because Thomas and Vanessa didn't know my secret. The lottery ticket tucked safely in my wallet had changed everything 3 weeks ago. $12 million. I hadn't told a soul. Not even when Thomas started suggesting I downsize after Vanessa mentioned wanting to start renovations on their house. Not even when they gave me 30 days to find a new place, then cut it to 2 weeks when Vanessa's interior designer had a sudden opening. I'd kept quiet, watching as my son transformed into someone I barely recognized. I wanted to see who Thomas really was without the knowledge of my newfound wealth. And now I knew. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first night in Sunnyside was the loneliest of my life. The apartment was clean but sterile. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige countertops. Nothing like the vibrant colors I'd filled my home with over the decades. I unpacked my clothes and a few precious photo albums, then sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, feeling the weight of silence pressing down. It was then I remembered Lucas's gift. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket, carefully opening it to reveal a crayon drawing of 2 figures, one tall, one small, standing beside a house with an enormous garden full of flowers. Across the top, in his careful schoolboy printing, "I love you, Grandma. Please come home soon." The tears I'd been holding back all day finally broke free. I clutched the drawing to my chest and wept for my lost home, for my changed son, for my grandson who didn't understand why his world was shifting. When the tears finally subsided, I made my way to the tiny kitchenette and brewed a cup of tea, my hands moving through the familiar motions while my mind raced ahead. I'd been so shocked by Thomas's behavior that I hadn't thought clearly about what to do next. The lottery money sat untouched in a special account my financial advisor Jennifer had set up. "Take your time," she'd advised. "This kind of windfall changes everything. Don't make any decisions until you're ready." I'd planned to help Thomas pay off his mortgage, set up a college fund for Lucas, maybe take a cruise. Simple dreams. Now, sipping tea in an apartment that echoed with emptiness, I realized I needed a different plan entirely. The next morning, I called Olivia, my best friend since our children were in kindergarten together. "Eleanor, how are you holding up? I still can't believe Thomas did this to you," she said, her voice crackling with indignation. "I'm surviving," I replied, looking out the small window at the parking lot. "But I need your help with something. Can you meet me for coffee? There's something I haven't told you." An hour later, we sat in a corner booth at Maggie's Diner, the same place we'd been meeting for decades. Olivia's eyes widened as I slid the lottery confirmation across the table. $12 million, she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one heard. "Eleanor Wilson, you've been sitting on this for 3 weeks and didn't tell me?" I smiled weakly. I was going to surprise everyone. Then Thomas started talking about wanting my house, and I wanted to see what would happen naturally. "And he kicked you out," Olivia said flatly. "That boy needs a serious reality check." "Maybe. But first, I need to figure out what I'm doing. I can't stay in that depressing apartment." Olivia tapped her fingernails against her coffee mug, thinking. "Remember Old Man Henderson's property on the edge of town? The one with the pond and all those gorgeous oak trees?" I nodded. The Henderson estate was legendary in Oak Ridge. 15 acres of pristine land with a beautiful craftsman house that had fallen into disrepair after Mr. Henderson passed away. His children had been trying to sell it for years, but the asking price was too steep for our small town. "It's still for sale," Olivia continued, a gleam in her eye. "And word is they just dropped the price again. Imagine what you could do with that place, Elle. It's only 10 minutes from town but feels like another world." For the first time since Thomas delivered his bombshell, I felt a flicker of excitement. I could see it. The graceful lines of the house restored, the gardens brought back to life, plenty of room for Lucas to explore whenever he visited. "Let me make a call," I said, reaching for my phone. 3 days later, I stood on the porch of what would soon be my new home. The real estate agent had been shocked when I made a cash offer, but the Henderson heirs were delighted to finally sell the property. As I gazed out over the sloping lawn toward the pond, I could almost see the future taking shape. Peaceful, independent, and entirely mine. I hadn't told Thomas about my plans. Our only communication had been a terse text message informing me that my furniture had been placed in storage to make things easier. Easier for whom? I wondered bitterly. "Eleanor, you ready to head back?" Marcus Reynolds, my new neighbor from the adjoining property, called from his truck. He'd kindly offered to drive me to the property after spotting me waiting for a taxi in town. "Just one more minute," I replied, breathing in the scent of pine and possibilities. Marcus was a widower in his early 60s with kind eyes and a quiet manner. He'd moved to Oak Ridge 5 years ago after retiring from teaching, looking for a simpler life. We'd spent the drive talking about gardening and his volunteer work at the Riverside Community Center. "You know," he said as I climbed back into his truck, "they're always looking for help at the center. Might be a good way to meet people if you're planning to settle here." I nodded, watching the Henderson estate, my future home, recede in the side mirror. I might just do that. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. I moved out of Sunnyside into a comfortable extended stay hotel while renovations began on the Henderson house. Jennifer helped me set up accounts to manage my winnings, ensuring I'd be financially secure for the rest of my life. I called Lucas every evening, careful to use the hotel's phone rather than my cell to hide my location from Thomas. "Grandma, when can I visit you?" he asked one night, his voice small. "Soon, sweetheart. I'm getting a new place ready. It has a pond with ducks and lots of space to play. Mom says you're probably living somewhere yucky because you didn't save." "Enough money?" he said with the brutal honesty of children. "She says that's why it's better you don't live with us anymore." My grip tightened on the receiver. Well, sometimes grown-ups don't know everything, even parents. "Would you like to know a secret?" "Yes." Lucas loved secrets. "My new house is going to be even bigger than your dad's. And do you know what the best part will be?" "What?" "Your very own room, decorated however you want it." His gasp of delight was worth every penny I was spending. Following Marcus's suggestion, I began volunteering at the Riverside Community Center 3 days a week. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They needed help with their after-school program, and I found myself surrounded by children eager for attention and guidance with homework. The director, Sharon, quickly became a friend, impressed by my patience and creativity with the kids. "You're a natural, Eleanor," she said one afternoon as we watched the children play. "We could use someone like you on staff if you're interested. It doesn't pay much, but—" "I'd love to," I interrupted. "But I don't need the money. In fact," I hesitated, then continued. "I'd like to make a donation to expand the art program, anonymously." Sharon's eyebrows shot up. "Anonymously? Are you sure? Most donors want their names on plaques." I smiled, thinking of the joy on Lucas's face when I'd described finger painting to him on our last call. "I'm positive. Some gifts are better given quietly." 2 months after Thomas evicted me, my new home was ready. The Henderson house had been transformed, the beautiful woodwork restored, the kitchen modernized while keeping its vintage charm, the gardens beginning to take shape under the care of a local landscaper. I'd furnished it with a mix of my treasured pieces from storage and carefully chosen new items that spoke to this fresh chapter in my life. The day I moved in, Olivia helped me hang Lucas's drawing in my study. "Have you heard from Thomas at all?" she asked, adjusting the frame until it sat perfectly level. "Not directly," I admitted. "He texted last week asking for my new address so they could send Lucas's school pictures. I gave him the P.O. box." "You're still not going to tell him about any of this?" Olivia gestured around the beautiful room. I sank into my reading chair, running my hand over the soft leather. "Not yet. Lucas knows I have a new house, but I've asked him to keep it our special secret for now." I smiled sadly. I'm waiting for Thomas to actually care enough to ask how I'm doing, to see if his conscience ever kicks in. Olivia's expression softened. "And if it doesn't? Then I'll know exactly where I stand." The answer came sooner than I expected. 1 week after moving in, I received a call from Lucas's school. He'd fallen during recess and hurt his arm. They'd been unable to reach Thomas, or Vanessa, and I was the emergency contact. I drove to Pine Valley Elementary in record time, heart pounding. Lucas sat in the nurse's office, his arm wrapped in an ice pack, tears streaking his face. The moment he saw me, he launched himself forward. "Grandma, it hurts," he sobbed against my shoulder. "I know, sweetheart. We're going to get you to the doctor right away," I soothed, signing the release forms the nurse held out. At the hospital, X-rays confirmed a minor fracture. As the doctor applied a cast to Lucas's arm, I finally reached Thomas on his cell. "Mom, what's going on? Why are you with Lucas?" His voice carried more annoyance than concern. "He broke his arm at school. We're at Mercy Hospital. The school tried to reach you and Vanessa for over an hour." A pause. Shit. I was in court, and Vanessa's at her spa retreat. Can you stay with him until I wrap up here? Probably another 2 hours. Before I could answer, Lucas spoke up. Can I go to Grandma's house, Dad? Please? She has ducks. Thomas sighed. Mom, just take him home. I'll pick him up tonight. I'll text you the address, I replied, feeling a mixture of sadness and vindication. Lucas's eyes grew round as dinner plates when we pulled through the gates of my new estate. This is your house? He gasped, pressing his good hand against the car window. This is home, I confirmed, smiling at his awestruck expression. I settled him on the window seat in the kitchen with juice and cookies while I prepared a light dinner. Despite the pain in his arm, Lucas couldn't contain his excitement, asking dozens of questions about the house and property. Can I see my room? You said I'd have my own room. I took his hand. Of course. I've been waiting for you to see it. The room I'd prepared for Lucas was a 10-year-old boy's dream. Walls painted a deep blue with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, a loft bed with a desk underneath, shelves filled with books and games, and a window overlooking the pond. It's awesome! He shouted, spinning around despite his cast. Wait till Dad sees this! The joy in his voice made my heart swell. This was what I'd wanted all along, to create a space where my grandson felt welcomed and loved, where our bond could continue to grow despite the rift with Thomas. At 6 o'clock, my security system alerted me to a car at the gate. I buzzed. Thomas in, watching through the window as his sleek BMW wound up the long driveway. His expression as he stepped out and took in the grand house was almost comical, jaw slack, eyes wide with disbelief. Lucas burst through the front door before I could open it. Dad! Dad! Grandma has the best house ever! I have my own room and everything! Thomas barely seemed to register his son's excitement. His eyes locked on me as I stepped onto the porch. Mom? What is this? Whose house is this? Mine, I said simply. Would you like to come in? He followed me inside, his gaze darting around the soaring entryway with its restored staircase and gleaming hardwood floors. Lucas tugged at his hand, eager to show off his room, but Thomas remained rooted in place. I don't understand, he said finally. How can you afford this? The Henderson estate must have cost $12 million buys a lot. Even these days? I interrupted quietly. Though I got it for considerably less. His face paled. 12 million. What are you talking about? I led him to the living room, gesturing for him to sit. I won the lottery, Thomas. 3 weeks before you told me I needed to leave my home. I was planning to surprise the family, to help you pay off your mortgage, set up college funds for Lucas. But then you and Vanessa decided I was in the way. Thomas sank onto the couch, stunned. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have changed your decision? I asked, meeting his gaze steadily. If you'd known I had money, would you still have packed my things and sent me to Sunnyside? His silence was answer enough. Lucas bounded back into the room, oblivious to the tension. Dad, can we have dinner here? Grandma made chicken pot pie. Thomas seemed to notice his son's cast for the first time. How's your arm, buddy? It hurts a little, but Grandma put stickers on my cast. See? He thrust his arm forward, showing off the dinosaur stickers I'd found in my craft supplies. Watching them, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Love for my grandson, disappointment in my son, and underneath it all, a new sense of strength I hadn't known I possessed. Stay for dinner, I offered. We should talk, and Lucas is excited to show you around. Thomas nodded mutely, still processing the revelation. Over pot pie and apple crumble, Lucas chattered about the ducks in the pond and the treehouse I'd promised to build once his arm healed. Thomas said little, his expression shifting between shame, confusion, and calculation. As Lucas settled in front of the TV with dessert, Thomas finally found his voice. I don't know what to say, Mom. I had no idea about the lottery. That's rather the point, isn't it? I replied, keeping my tone gentle despite the hurt still raw within me. You didn't see me as someone worth considering until you learned I had something to offer. That's not fair, he protested, but weakly. We thought you'd be better off in a smaller place. Your house was too big for one person. It wasn't about the house size, Thomas. It was about respect, about recognizing that I might want to say, in my own life. I sighed, feeling suddenly tired. The money doesn't matter. What matters is that when you thought I had nothing, I became disposable. He flinched as though I'd slapped him. I never meant to. I know, I cut him off. I don't think you meant to hurt me. You just didn't think about me at all. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of truth hanging between us. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice small. Can we fix this? I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, and somewhere in between, the person he might still grow to be. I don't know, I answered honestly, but we can try, starting with respecting each other's choices. Vanessa won't be happy, he muttered. Vanessa's happiness isn't my concern anymore, I replied, but yours and Lucas's are. He'll always have a place here, and so will you if you want it. Later, as Thomas prepared to leave with a sleepy Lucas in tow, he paused at the door. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I nodded, accepting his words without fully embracing them. Apologies were easy. Change was hard. Time would tell which path Thomas would choose. After they left, I walked through my new home, turning off lights, straightening cushions, closing the door to Lucas's room with a smile at the rumpled bed where he'd bounced excitedly. Outside, the moon cast silver light across the pond, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. The lottery hadn't just given me financial freedom, it had shown me who I was when everything familiar was stripped away. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, built new friendships, found purpose in my volunteer work, and created a home that was truly mine. Thomas might never fully understand the lesson in all this, but I did. Sometimes losing what you thought mattered reveals what truly does. Sometimes being kicked out opens the door to where you're meant to be. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, on your own terms, surrounded by those who value you for exactly who you are. 3 months had passed since Thomas discovered my lottery win. Autumn had painted the Henderson estate in brilliant shades of red and gold, leaves drifting across the lawn like nature's confetti. I'd settled into a routine, mornings in the garden while the air was still crisp, afternoons at the community center, evenings filled with books or visits from new friends. My life had taken shape in ways I never could have imagined that day. My possessions hit the sidewalk. Thomas had called exactly 4 times. The first was an awkward attempt to smooth things over, filled with half apologies and vague promises to visit. The second was to ask if Lucas could stay with me for a weekend, while he and Vanessa attended a wedding. The third and fourth were brief check-ins that felt more like obligation than genuine interest. Each conversation ended with a tension neither of us knew how to resolve. Vanessa hadn't spoken to me at all. According to Olivia, who heard it from her cousin who played tennis with Vanessa's sister, she was furious about my deception and convinced I'd been planning this as some sort of revenge. The irony wasn't lost on me. In her mind, I was the villain for simply allowing her true colors to show. I was pruning the rose bushes near the pond when my phone rang. Lucas's school again. My heart skipped a beat. Had he been hurt again? Mrs. Wilson? This is Principal Gardner. I'm afraid there's been an incident with Lucas. Is he all right? I gripped the phone tighter, already moving toward the house to grab my car keys. Physically, yes. But he's been involved in a fight with another student. We need a family member to come in. We've been trying to reach his parents, but they're not answering. I finished for her. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I found Lucas sitting outside the principal's office. his uniform shirt torn at the collar, a bruise darkening below, his left eye. When he saw me, his face crumpled. "I didn't start it, Grandma," he whispered as I sat beside him. "Jeremy said my dad didn't want me, and that's why I stay with you all the time now." My heart broke a little more. "Oh, Lucas." Principal Gardner, a stern woman with kind eyes, invited us into her office. "Lucas did throw the first punch," she explained. "But from what several witnesses told us, Jeremy's taunting was quite persistent and personal." "I understand," I said, placing a protective hand on Lucas's shoulder. "What happens now?" "School policy requires a 1-day suspension for physical altercations. However, we're also addressing Jeremy's behavior. Bullying isn't tolerated either." I nodded, thanked her, and signed the necessary paperwork. As we walked to my car, Lucas remained uncharacteristically quiet, his shoulders hunched forward. "Am I in big trouble?" he finally asked as we pulled away from the school. "Fighting isn't the answer, Lucas. You know that." But he wouldn't stop, Grandma. He kept saying Dad sent me away because I'm bad, just like Dad sent you away. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, struggling to find the right words. Sometimes people say hurtful things because they're hurting too, or because they don't understand the situation. I glanced at him. But what Jeremy said isn't true. Your dad loves you very much. Then why does he keep forgetting to pick me up? Why does he always look at his phone when I'm talking? Why does Vanessa say I'm too noisy when her son is way louder than me? Each question hit like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on my own hurt with Thomas that I hadn't fully recognized how deeply Lucas was affected by the changes in our family. Adults make mistakes, sweetheart. Big ones sometimes. I took a deep breath. Your dad is struggling to balance a lot of things right now. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Lucas stared out the window, unconvinced. Can I stay with you? Instead, forever. The question hung in the air between us. How I wished I could say yes, to promise him the stability and attention he craved. But that wasn't my decision to make, no matter how much money I had. Let's start with today and tomorrow, I suggested gently. I'll call your dad and let him know you're with me. At the house, I settled Lucas with a snack and his favorite cartoon while I stepped onto the porch to call Thomas. He answered on the 5th ring, sounding harried. Mom, I'm heading into a meeting. Lucas was suspended from school today, I interrupted. For fighting. There was a beat of silence. Fighting? Lucas? That doesn't sound like him. The other boy was taunting him about being unwanted at home. I kept my voice neutral with effort. He's with me now. I thought you should know. Thomas sighed heavily. I'll come by after work. Around 7? We'll be here. The rest of the afternoon, I focused on Lucas. We baked chocolate chip cookies from scratch, took a walk around the pond to feed the ducks, and started building a model airplane kit I'd bought for his next visit. Slowly, his smiles returned, though a shadow lingered behind his eyes that hadn't been there before. At 6:40, the security system alerted me to a car at the gate. Thomas, for once, was early. I found Lucas in his room, meticulously arranging his model airplane parts. Your dad's here, sweetheart. His hands stilled. Do I have to go home with him? The question caught me off guard. Don't you want to? He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. It's better here. You actually look at me when I talk. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. I gave Lucas's shoulder a gentle squeeze. Come down when you're ready, okay? Thomas stood on the porch, briefcase still in hand, looking exhausted. His suit was impeccable as always, but new lines creased the corners of his eyes. For a moment, I saw the boy he'd once been, eager to please, desperate for approval, terrified of falling short. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Would you like some coffee? We just finished dinner. He shook his head. I can't stay long. Vanessa has her book club tonight and I need to get back to watch Jason. Jason, Vanessa's 7-year-old from her first marriage, the child who seemed to get the attention Lucas craved. "Thomas, we need to talk about Lucas. Really talk." I led him to the living room. "He's struggling." "Kids fight, Mom. It happens." "This isn't about the fight. It's about why he fought." I sat across from him, leaning forward. "He feels unwanted, Thomas. Replaceable." My son's defensive posture faltered. "That's ridiculous. He's my son. Being your son and feeling valued are two different things." I gentled my tone. "When was the last time you spent a day with just Lucas? No work calls, no Vanessa, no Jason?" Thomas opened his mouth, closed it, then rubbed his forehead. "Things have been busy. The merger at work, the house renovations. I know, life gets complicated, but children don't understand busy. They just know when they're not a priority." A flash of the old Thomas, thoughtful, empathetic, crossed his face. "Has he said something to you?" He asked if he could stay with me forever. The words hung heavy in the space between us. Thomas looked as though I'd physically struck him. Before he could respond, Lucas appeared in the doorway, model airplane piece still clutched in his hand. "Hi, Dad," he said quietly. Thomas stood, awkwardness radiating from him. "Hey, buddy. Heard you had a rough day." Lucas shrugged, eyes downcast. "Jeremy's a jerk." "Still, we don't solve problems with our fists." Thomas attempted paternal authority, but it fell flat. "We'll talk about this more at home." "Do I have to go home?" Lucas's voice was small but determined. "Grandma said I could stay tonight and tomorrow because of my suspension." Thomas glanced at me, a mixture of hurt and accusation in his eyes. I held his gaze steadily. "I thought it might be easier for everyone," I explained. "You and Vanessa both work, and he needs supervision." "I could work from home," Thomas countered, but the argument lacked conviction. Lucas scuffed his foot against the carpet. "Please, Dad. We're building a model airplane, and Grandma said we could make pizza tomorrow." I saw the moment Thomas surrendered, his shoulders slumping slightly. "All right, but just for tonight and tomorrow." He turned to me. "I'll pick him up after work tomorrow, around 6?" I nodded, relief washing through me. Not because I wanted to keep Lucas from Thomas, but because the boy clearly needed this safe harbor right now. After Thomas left, with a stilted hug for Lucas and a conflicted nod for me, Lucas and I returned to the model airplane. His hands moved methodically, following the instructions with precision beyond his years. "Grandma?" he asked, not looking up from his work. "Why doesn't Dad want to be with me anymore?" The question pierced straight through my heart. I sat down, the glue I'd been holding, and gently turned his face toward mine. "Your dad loves you very much, Lucas. Sometimes adults get distracted by new things, new people, new problems. It doesn't mean they've stopped loving the people who were already in their lives. Like how he got distracted by Vanessa and forgot about you?" Children's perception never failed to humble me. Something like that. But people can remember what's important. They can find their way back. "I hope Dad remembers soon," Lucas whispered. "I miss how things used to be." That night, after tucking Lucas into his bed, I sat on my porch swing watching the stars emerge. The October air carried a hint of wood smoke from somewhere distant, and the chorus of crickets rose and fell in gentle waves. My mind kept returning to the lost look in my grandson's eyes, the confusion in my son's. How had we come to this? When had Thomas, my thoughtful, compassionate boy, become someone who could discard his mother and neglect his son? Was it ambition? Vanessa's influence? Or had I missed warning signs years ago, some failure in how I'd raised him? The next morning, Lucas and I made pancakes shaped like animals, then spent the day exploring the property, collecting leaves for a science project, and making the promised pizza from scratch. He laughed more freely than he had in months, the bruise under his eye already fading to a yellowish smudge. As the afternoon waned, his mood darkened. I found him sitting by the pond, tossing pebbles into the water with increasing force. "I don't want to go home," he said as I sat beside him. "Can't I just live here with you?" I wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "Your home is with your dad, Lucas. That's where you belong." But he doesn't even see me there. And Vanessa's always telling me to be quieter, to be neater, to be more like Jason. His voice cracked. "I hate it." I pulled him closer, feeling his thin shoulders shake with suppressed emotion. "Have you told your dad how you feel?" He shook his head against my side. "He's always too busy. Or Vanessa's there." An idea began forming in my mind. What if I talked to him? Maybe suggest that you spend more time here. Regular visits, not just when there's an emergency. Lucas looked up, hope brightening his eyes. "Like every weekend?" "We'll see what your dad says. But I think you need some special time with just him, too." I brushed his hair back from his forehead. "Would you like that? If Dad came here sometimes, just the two of you?" He considered this, his young face serious. "Would you make us pancakes before you left us alone?" I laughed, hugging him tighter. "Absolutely. The best animal pancakes you've ever seen." Thomas arrived at 6:15, looking marginally more relaxed than the day before. Lucas was surprisingly cooperative about gathering his things, bolstered perhaps by our earlier conversation. "Can I show Dad the treehouse plans before we go?" he asked, already pulling Thomas toward the back garden where we'd staked out the location. "Of course," I smiled, hanging back to give them a moment. From the kitchen window, I watched them. Thomas crouched to Lucas's level as the boy pointed excitedly at different trees, gesturing animatedly. Something in my son's posture shifted, a softening, an attentiveness I hadn't seen in too long. He tousled Lucas's hair, nodded at whatever the boy was saying. When they returned to the house, Thomas approached me while Lucas ran upstairs for his backpack. "A treehouse, huh?" "Just in the planning stages," I replied. "I've got a contractor coming to look at the trees next week." Thomas studied me, something unreadable in his expression. "You're really settling in here." "I am. It's becoming home." He nodded slowly. "Lucas seems happy here." "He needs stability, Thomas, and attention." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "I've been thinking, maybe Lucas could spend more regular time here, not just in emergencies." "You mean like visitation?" His voice held a defensive edge. "I mean like family time. He's struggling, Thomas. The fight at school wasn't an isolated incident." I took a deep breath. "And maybe sometimes you could come too. Just you and Lucas. No work, no distractions." He stiffened. "Are you saying I'm a bad father?" "No. I'm saying you're a busy father with a complicated life. But Lucas needs to know he matters more than the complications." Before Thomas could respond, Lucas thundered down the stairs, backpack bouncing against his spine. "I'm ready, Dad." The drive after they left, I called Jennifer to discuss setting up a trust for Lucas. Not because I wanted to buy his affection, but because I wanted him protected regardless of what happened with Thomas and Vanessa. The discussion of financial details helped distract me from the emptiness that always settled over the house when Lucas left. The following Sunday, as I was trimming dead blooms from the hydrangeas, my phone rang. "Thomas." "Mom?" His voice sounded strange, tight, almost choked. "Are you home?" "Yes. What's wrong?" "Can I come over? Alone? I need to talk to you." Alarm. Bells rang in my mind. "Of course. Is Lucas all right?" "He's fine. He's with Vanessa's mother." A pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." I paced the foyer for the next 18 minutes. imagination conjuring increasingly worrying scenarios. When the security alert pinged, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Thomas's BMW looked out of place in my driveway. Too sleek, too urban against the rustic beauty of the property. He emerged from the car slowly, his movements lacking their usual crisp precision. As he approached, I noticed his eyes were red-rimmed. "Thomas? What's happened?" He didn't answer until we were seated in the living room, a pot of tea between us that neither of us touched. "Vanessa's leaving," he finally said, staring at his hands. "She wants a divorce." I absorbed this information, careful to keep my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that. May I ask why?" He laughed, a hollow sound without humor. "Apparently, I'm emotionally unavailable and obsessed with work. Oh, and I clearly have unresolved issues with you and Lucas." He rubbed his face roughly. "She's been seeing someone for months, her personal trainer." Despite everything Vanessa had done, despite how she'd treated Lucas and me, I felt no satisfaction in Thomas's pain. This was my son, hurting. "What do you need?" I asked simply. His composure cracked then, tears filling his eyes. "I've made such a mess of everything, Mom. My marriage, my relationship with Lucas, with you." He looked around the beautiful room. "You created all this for yourself after I kicked you out. Meanwhile, I can't even keep my own life together." I moved to sit beside him on the sofa, taking his hand like I used to when he was small and overwhelmed by big emotions. "Life gets messy sometimes. We clean it up and start again." "Lucas was right," he whispered. "When he said I didn't see him at home, I didn't see anything clearly." He squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for all of it. For putting Vanessa's wishes above your well-being. For not standing up for you or for Lucas." The apology I'd been waiting for all these months washed over me. Not the half-hearted attempt from that first night, but a genuine recognition of wrongs done. Something tight in my chest began to loosen. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Fight for custody of Lucas, for starters. Vanessa's already making noise about how Jason needs stability, not a half-brother complicating things." His jaw tightened. "I won't let her push Lucas aside." "Good," I said firmly. "He needs to know he's your priority." Thomas nodded, wiping roughly at his eyes. "I'm putting the house on the market, too. Too many bad memories there." He hesitated. "Is that offer still open? For Lucas to spend more time here?" "Always," I assured him. "This is his home, too, whenever he needs it." I paused. "And yours, Thomas. If you need a place to stay while you sort things out?" "I couldn't," he interrupted. "Not after everything." "Family is family," I said simply. "Even when we hurt each other. Maybe especially then." Thomas stayed for dinner, tension gradually easing from his shoulders as we talked. Not just about Vanessa and the divorce, but about his work, his dreams, his fears. For the first time since he was a teenager, my son spoke to me as a person, not just his mother. As he prepared to leave, standing in the doorway with car keys in hand, he turned back. "Mom, would it be okay if I brought Lucas by tomorrow after school? Maybe we could start on that treehouse." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the lottery winnings. "I'd like that very much." After Thomas left, I walked through the quiet house, turning off lights, straightening cushions, reflecting on the day's unexpected developments. Outside, an owl called into the darkness, its voice echoing across the property. I paused at the window in Lucas's room, gazing out at the stars speckling the night sky. The path forward wouldn't be smooth. Thomas had deep wounds to heal, patterns to break. Lucas needed time to trust that his father's attention wouldn't vanish again. And I had my own journey, learning to be a mother to an adult son who had hurt me, finding the balance between forgiveness and self-protection. But for the first time since that day my boxes hit the sidewalk, I felt hope for our family. Not because of the money or the beautiful estate, but because truth had finally broken through the walls we'd built around ourselves. And truth, painful as it sometimes was, created the only foundation strong enough to rebuild what had been broken. Winter descended on Oak Ridge with unusual ferocity. Snow blanketed the Henderson estate, transforming it into something from a fairy tale. Pristine white drifts punctuated by the dark silhouettes of bare trees. The pond froze solid, a perfect mirror of ice catching the pale December sunlight. I'd always loved winter, the quiet hush that fell over the world, nature's pause button before spring's renewal. The greenhouse I'd had built on the eastern edge of the property had become my sanctuary. While snow piled against its glass walls, inside flourished a riot of green. Herbs, flowers, even a small lemon tree. I spent hours there each morning, tending my plants, planning the spring garden, breathing in the humid, fertile air. Today, however, I was in the kitchen baking Lucas's favorite cookies. He and Thomas were coming for the weekend, a routine we'd established over the past 2 months since Vanessa's departure. The divorce proceedings had turned ugly quickly. Vanessa, furious at being exposed, had weaponized everything she could, including Lucas. She keeps telling Jason that Lucas isn't his real brother, Thomas had explained during one of our evening phone calls, voice tight with controlled anger. And she's fighting for the house out of spite, even though she's the one who left. The legal battles had taken a toll on Thomas. The confident, often arrogant man who had once evicted me from my home had been replaced by someone more subdued, more thoughtful, and considerably more humble. Pain had changed him, as it changes all of us when we allow it to teach rather than embitter. The security system chimed, alerting me to a car at the gate. I glanced at the clock. They were early. Good. I'd prepared Thomas's favorite beef stew, as well, simmering now on the stove, filling the kitchen with savory warmth. I opened the front door as Thomas's car pulled up. Lucas burst out before the engine was fully off, racing toward me with the boundless energy of childhood. "Grandma, we finished my science project, and I got an A on my history test, and Dad's teaching me chess." I hugged him close, relishing the solid feel of him in my arms. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I want to hear all about it." Thomas followed more slowly, carrying their overnight bags, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Hi, Mom." "Long week?" I asked, taking one of the bags from him. He nodded, offering a tired smile. "Settlement negotiations. Vanessa's lawyer is—" He glanced at Lucas, who had already darted inside in search of cookies. "Well, let's just say challenging." I squeezed his arm sympathetically. "You're here now. Leave it at the gate." Inside, Lucas had already discovered the cookies cooling on the rack and was carefully selecting the largest one. Thomas hung their coats by the door, the domestic gesture somehow poignant. This routine, these weekend visits, had become a lifeline for all of us. "Can we work on the treehouse?" Lucas asked around a mouthful of cookie. The snow stopped. The treehouse had become our family project. What had started as a simple platform had evolved into an elaborate 2-level structure with windows, a trapdoor, and a pulley system. Thomas, discovering an unexpected talent for carpentry, had thrown himself into the design with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since he was a boy building model airplanes. "Let's eat lunch first," I suggested. "Then, we can head out for a couple hours before it gets dark." Over beef stew and fresh bread, Lucas chattered about school, friends, and his upcoming basketball season. Thomas ate hungrily, some color returning to his face as the meal progressed. I noticed him watching Lucas with a soft expression that spoke volumes: pride, love, and a touch of wonder, as if rediscovering his son after a long absence. "Mrs. Chen assigned a family history project," Lucas announced, scraping his bowl clean. "We have to interview family members and make a timeline." "That sounds interesting," I replied, refilling Thomas's water glass. "What do you need to know?" "Everything," like where our family came from and stories about when you and Dad were younger. He turned to Thomas. Dad said you'd tell me about when you broke your arm trying to jump off the garage roof. Thomas groaned. Thanks for that suggestion. Mom! I laughed. You were convinced you could fly if you just had the right cape. I was 8. And stubborn as a mule. Some things never change. Lucas looked between us, delighted by this glimpse into his father's childhood. Were you naughty, Dad? Thomas chuckled. I had my moments, but your grandmother never let me get away with anything for long. The easy banter continued through lunch, a newfound comfort settling over us. Afterward, bundled in coats, hats, and gloves, we trudged through the snow to the treehouse site. Thomas climbed the ladder first, checking that the platform was clear of snow and ice before allowing Lucas up. I watched from below as they worked together, measuring and marking where the next wall section would go. Lucas handed tools to his father with solemn importance, asking questions, absorbing instructions. Thomas was patient, encouraging, fully present in a way he hadn't been since before Vanessa. Mom, could you hand up that thermos? Thomas called down. I think we all need some hot chocolate. I passed up the thermos I'd prepared before we left the house, then climbed the ladder myself to join them. The platform was sturdy enough for all 3 of us, though a bit crowded with the tools and lumber. Look at the view, Grandma! Lucas pointed across the property to where the frozen pond gleamed in the late afternoon sun. You can see everything from up here. He was right. The estate spread out below us, the main house with smoke curling from the chimney, the greenhouse glowing like an emerald, the sweeping driveway curving through snow-laden trees. Beyond our property, the rooftops of Oak Ridge peeked through, the winter landscape, church steeples and water towers rising above the residential streets. It's beautiful, I agreed, sipping my hot chocolate. When spring comes, we'll be able to see all the way to the river. Can we build a zip line to the pond? Lucas asked, eyes wide with excitement. Thomas laughed. Let's finish the walls first, buddy. We worked until the light began to fade, our breath clouding in the increasingly cold air. Back in the house, we shed our damp outer layers and gathered in the living room where I'd built a fire earlier. Lucas sprawled on the hearth rug with his tablet, playing an educational game Thomas had downloaded for him. Thomas and I sat on the sofa, mugs of fresh coffee warming our hands. How are you really doing? I asked quietly, ensuring Lucas was absorbed in his game. Thomas sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. Honestly, it's been hell. Vanessa is determined to make this as painful as possible. He stared into his coffee. She's demanding full custody of Jason, of course, which I expected. But she's also trying to get partial custody of Lucas. Weekend visitation. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Why would she want that? She barely paid attention to him when they lived together. It's about hurting me, not about Lucas. Thomas's voice held a weary resignation. Her lawyer argues that Lucas has a sibling relationship with Jason that shouldn't be severed. That's absurd. She's the one who created division between the boys. I know. My lawyer says it won't hold up, especially since Lucas is old enough for the judge to consider his preferences. He glanced toward his son, lowering his voice further. But it's taking a toll on him. He overheard Vanessa telling Jason that she was going to make sure they stayed brothers, even if it meant Lucas had to live with them part-time. My blood boiled at the thought of Lucas being used as a pawn in Vanessa's revenge game. What did Lucas say? He locked himself in his room and refused to come out until I promised he wouldn't have to go. Thomas rubbed his face. I shouldn't have brought this up. Not this weekend. I don't have anyone else to talk to about it. The admission, this acknowledgement of my place in his life as confidant and support, touched me deeply. I'm glad you told me. We're in this together. Thomas, all 3 of us. He nodded, offering a grateful smile. Thanks, Mom. That evening, After a dinner of homemade pizza, Lucas insisted on arranging the toppings in the shape of a smiley face. We settled in for a movie night. Lucas, full of food and tired from the outdoor work, fell asleep halfway through, his head resting against Thomas's arm. "He's out cold," Thomas whispered, carefully shifting to make Lucas more comfortable. I smiled, taking in the peaceful tableau of my son and grandson. "He feels safe. That's why he can sleep so deeply." Thomas gazed down at Lucas, gently brushing hair from the boy's forehead. "I've been thinking about moving." "Oh?" I kept my tone neutral, though my pulse quickened. "The apartment I'm renting is fine for now, but it's not a home. Lucas deserves better." He hesitated. "There's a property for sale about 10 minutes from here. Nothing as grand as this place, but it has a few acres, a solid house, room for Lucas to run around, maybe get that dog he's been asking for." "That sounds wonderful, Thomas." "It would mean changing school districts, but Lucas's current school hasn't been great about the bullying situation." His fingers continued, their gentle stroking of Lucas's hair. "And being closer to you, that would be good for all of us, I think." The implication hung in the air between us, a vision of our family rebuilding itself, growing together rather than apart. Not erasing the past hurts, but moving forward with the lessons they'd taught us. "I think so too," I replied softly. Later, after Thomas carried Lucas up to his room and retired to the guest suite himself, I sat alone by the dying fire. The old clock in the hallway chimed 11, its resonant tones echoing through the quiet house. Outside, snow had begun falling again, fat flakes drifting past the windows. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from that terrible day on the sidewalk to this peaceful evening with my family under my roof. The lottery win had changed my external circumstances dramatically, but the true transformation had been internal. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, built a new life from the ashes of the old, and ultimately created space for healing that might never have happened otherwise. Morning arrived with blinding brightness, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow. I woke early, as was my habit, and was surprised to find Thomas already in the kitchen, coffee maker gurgling cheerfully. "You're up with the birds," I commented, accepting the mug he offered. "Couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts." He leaned against the counter, steam from his own mug fogging his glasses slightly. "I've been thinking about what Lucas said yesterday, about the family history project." "Oh?" It made me realize how little I've shared with him about our family, about Dad, about growing up here in Oak Ridge. He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "When I left for college, I was so eager to get away, to become something different from what I'd been here. And then, after Dad died, you pulled away even more," I finished gently. Harold's death from cancer had hit Thomas hard, coming just as he was establishing his career in Pine Valley. He'd thrown himself into work, visits home becoming increasingly rare. He nodded. "I think that's part of why it was so easy for me to go along with Vanessa's idea of taking the house. It wasn't really home to me anymore. I disconnected from it, from Oak Ridge, from you." The admission hung in the air, painfully honest. "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm reconnecting with what matters. With who matters." He set down his mug. "I made an offer on that property yesterday. My realtor called last night. They accepted." Joy bubbled up inside me. "Thomas, that's wonderful. There's something else." He took a deep breath. "I've been offered a partnership in a smaller firm here in Oak Ridge. Less prestige than my current position, but also less pressure. Regular hours. No more missing Lucas's school events because I'm stuck in depositions. You'd be moving your practice here? Completely?" "If the house purchase goes through, yes." His expression was resolute. "It's time for a change, Mom. The kind of success I've been chasing, it cost me my marriage. Nearly cost me my relationship with you, and was starting to cost me Lucas. He shook his head. It's not worth it. Before I could respond, thundering footsteps on the stairs announced Lucas's awakening. He burst into the kitchen in rumpled pajamas, hair sticking up at odd angles. It snowed more. Can we go sledding? Dad, you promised we could go sledding if it snowed enough. Thomas laughed, the serious moment broken. Good morning to you too, Tornado. Yes, we can go sledding after breakfast. Yes! Lucas pumped his fist triumphantly, then turned to me. Grandma, are you coming too? I think I'll leave the sledding. To you youngsters. I smiled, already reaching for the pancake ingredients. But I'll have hot cocoa waiting when you're done. The morning passed in a blur of domestic contentment. After chocolate chip pancakes, Thomas and Lucas bundled up and headed to the hill behind the house, armed with the sleds I'd purchased in anticipation of winter visits. From the kitchen window, I watched them trudge up and coast down, again and again, their laughter carrying faintly through the glass. Around noon, as I was preparing lunch, my phone rang. Jennifer, my financial advisor. Eleanor, I've been trying to reach you. Great news. That investment in the medical tech startup we discussed. It just went public, and the initial share price is double what we anticipated. That's wonderful, I replied, only half listening as I continued to watch Thomas, showing Lucas how to build a snow fort. It means the educational foundation you wanted to establish could be funded immediately, rather than waiting until next fiscal year, Jennifer continued. We should meet to discuss the parameters, how many scholarships per year, selection criteria, that sort of thing. The foundation had been my most ambitious plan for the lottery winnings, a program to provide college scholarships for Oak Ridge students, particularly those interested in healthcare careers. Harold had been a family doctor in town for 40 years. It seemed a fitting tribute to his memory. Can we meet next week? I asked. I have family visiting until Sunday. Thomas and Lucas? Jennifer's voice warmed. She'd become a friend as well as an advisor over the past months and knew about our family's gradual reconciliation. Yes, and Jennifer. Thomas is moving to Oak Ridge. He's buying property nearby. Eleanor, that's marvelous. Will he be bringing his practice here too? A partnership with the Oak Ridge firm. The town could certainly use more good lawyers. Jennifer's tone shifted to business again. This might affect some of our planning for your estate. We should review the trusts we set up for Lucas. Maybe consider provisions for Thomas as well. Let's discuss everything next week, I agreed. Tuesday afternoon? After ending the call, I returned to lunch preparations, mind whirling with possibilities. Thomas moving to Oak Ridge changed everything, in the best possible way. Instead of occasional visits, we could build a true extended family life. Lucas could have stability, a permanent room in both our homes, the security of knowing both his father and grandmother were fully present in his life. The back door burst open, bringing a gust of cold air and two snow-covered figures. Mom, we built an igloo, Thomas announced, cheeks flushed with cold and exertion. Almost an igloo, Lucas corrected, shedding his snow pants. It fell in when Dad tried to make the roof. Structural engineering was never my strong suit, Thomas admitted with a laugh. I handed them each a mug of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. Lunch is almost ready. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, perfect for warming up. As we ate, Thomas shared the news about the house purchase with Lucas, who initially seemed confused. But where will we live in Pine Valley? He asked, dipping his sandwich into his soup. We won't, buddy. We'll be moving here to Oak Ridge. I'll be working at a new law office and you'll go to school here. Lucas's eyes widened. Near Grandma? Like, super near? About 10 minutes away, Thomas confirmed. And the new house has a big yard, maybe big enough for a dog. Lucas nearly knocked over his soup in excitement. Really? We're really getting a dog? Once we're settled, Thomas qualified, but his smile was indulgent. The house needs some work first. New paint, some repairs. I can help, Lucas declared. I'm good at building stuff now. Like the treehouse. I watched them plan. What color? To paint Lucas's new room, where a doghouse might go. Whether a lab or a shepherd would be better. Feeling a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. This was what the lottery win had truly given me. Not just financial security, but the opportunity to rebuild what mattered most. After lunch, as Thomas helped Lucas with homework at the dining room table, I retreated to my study to review some papers for the community center. The director had asked me to consider joining the board, a position I was increasingly inclined to accept. My volunteer work there had expanded from the after-school program to include adult literacy classes and a senior computer skills workshop. A soft knock interrupted my reading. Thomas stood in the doorway, hesitant. Got a minute? Of course. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Lucas settled with his work? He's making a detailed pro-con list for different dog breeds. Thomas smiled fondly. He gets that methodical streak from you. A compliment, I hope. Definitely. He sat, glancing around the study with appreciation. The room had become distinctly mine. Walls lined with bookshelves, a comfortable reading chair by the window, framed botanical prints I'd collected. This suits you. Thank you. I've enjoyed making this house my own. I set aside my papers. What's on your mind? Thomas leaned forward, elbows on knees. I need to ask you something important about the lottery win. I tensed slightly. Despite our reconciliation, we'd never fully discussed the money beyond that initial confrontation. What about it? I want to be clear about something. His expression was earnest, almost painfully so. I'm not moving to Oak Ridge because of your money. I'm not expecting anything from the lottery win. That's yours. You earned it by being treated terribly, and I was part of that treatment. Relief flooded through me. This was the Thomas I'd raised, thoughtful, ethical despite his mistakes. I never thought that was your motivation. Good. He straightened. Because I need to do this on my own terms. Buy the house myself. Build. My practice, take care of Lucas. I don't want him growing up thinking family relationships are transactional. I understand completely. And I did. Thomas needed to prove to himself, as much as to me, that he could rebuild his life honestly. But I hope you'll let me help with Lucas's education. I've established a trust for his college fund. Thomas nodded slowly. That would be acceptable. As his grandmother, that's appropriate. Something in his careful wording made me smile. Very lawyerly of you. He laughed, tension breaking. Professional hazard. Then, more seriously, thank you for understanding, Mom. For everything, really. I don't deserve how gracious you've been. That's the thing about family, Thomas. It's not about deserving. It's about belonging through all the mistakes and mess-ups. He held my gaze for a long moment, something profound passing between us. Acknowledgement of hurt caused and forgiveness offered, of lessons learned at great cost, of love that had weathered its greatest test and emerged battered but intact. Lucas wants to interview you tomorrow for his family history project, he said finally. I told him you'd have the best stories. I'll dig out the old photo albums, I promised, including the ones of you in that unfortunate bowl cut phase. Thomas groaned dramatically. On second thought, maybe we should stick to the dignified family history. I laughed, savoring the moment of lightness between us. Not a chance. Embarrassing childhood photos are a grandmother's privilege. As Thomas left to check on Lucas, I turned back to my papers. But my mind kept wandering to the future unfurling before us. A future I couldn't have imagined during those dark days after being evicted. The money had given me options, certainly. But the true richness lay in what couldn't be bought. Second chances, hard-won wisdom, the slow rebuilding of trust. Snow continued to fall outside my window, erasing footprints, covering the scars of winter with fresh possibility. In its quiet way, nature was reminding me of what I already knew, that endings often contain beginnings, that loss creates space for new growth, and that sometimes the path forward only becomes clear when we're forced to leave the familiar behind. Spring arrived in Oak Ridge with a gentle persistence, coaxing green shoots from thawed earth and buds from winter bare branches. My gardens exploded with color, daffodils nodding their bright heads in the breeze, tulips standing at attention. Along the pathways, flowering trees dusting the lawn with delicate petals. After the stark beauty of winter, this riotous rebirth felt like nature's celebration. Thomas and Lucas had moved into their new home a month ago, just as the first crocuses were pushing through the soil. The property, while modest compared to the Henderson estate, was charming. A solid craftsman house with a wraparound porch, 5 acres of mixed woodland and meadow, and a small stream perfect for childhood adventures. Thomas had thrown himself into renovation work with unexpected enthusiasm, revealing a talent for carpentry inherited from Harold but never before explored. Lucas had settled into Oak Ridge Elementary with remarkable ease, quickly making friends and thriving under the more attentive administration. The bullying issues that had plagued him in Pine Valley faded into memory as he blossomed in his new environment. And true to his promise, Thomas had adopted a 2-year-old golden retriever mix from the local shelter, named Rusty for his deep copper coat. The dog and boy had become inseparable, partners in exploration and mischief. Today, I was preparing for a special dinner. Thomas's divorce from Vanessa had finally been settled, with Thomas retaining full custody of Lucas. To celebrate this closure and new beginning, I'd invited not only Thomas and Lucas, but also Marcus, my neighbor, and Olivia and her husband. The community center director, Sharon, and her wife would round out our party. As I arranged flowers from my garden on the dining table, a casual mix of tulips and early lilacs, the phone rang. Jennifer, my financial advisor. "Just checking in before our meeting tomorrow," she said briskly. "I've reviewed the new investment opportunities we discussed, and I think the Sustainable Energy Fund aligns perfectly with your goals." "I trust your judgment," I replied, tucking the phone between ear and shoulder as I continued my arrangement. "And what about the Scholarship Foundation? Is everything on track for the fall launch?" "Absolutely. The board is reviewing the final application criteria next week. 5 full-ride scholarships per year, with priority for students pursuing healthcare careers." Her voice warmed. "It's going to make a real difference in Oak Ridge, Eleanor." We chatted briefly about a few other matters before ending the call. As I placed the last tulip in the arrangement, I reflected on how different my financial conversations were now compared to a year ago. Before the lottery, my concerns had centered on stretching my modest retirement savings to last through my golden years. Now, my focus was on creating lasting impact, on using this unexpected wealth to strengthen my community and secure my family's future. The security system chimed, announcing a car at the gate. I checked the time. Early, but likely Thomas and Lucas, who rarely arrived exactly when expected. Sure enough, moments later, Lucas burst through the front door, Rusty at his heels. "Grandma, Dad let me drive the tractor." He flung himself at me with his customary enthusiasm. "The garden tractor," Thomas clarified, following at a more sedate pace. "And only on the flat part of the yard with me right beside him." I laughed, hugging Lucas. "Sounds exciting. And hello to you too, Rusty." I bent to pat the dog, who was dancing around my feet, tail wagging furiously. "We're early," Thomas said, setting a covered dish on the counter. "I thought we could help set up, and I brought that corn pudding you like." "Thank you. That's perfect with the ham." I gestured to the flowers. "Lucas, would you help me finish these arrangements? I need smaller ones for the side tables." While Lucas carefully selected blooms under my guidance, Thomas slipped into the familiar routine of setting the dining table, a task he'd assumed during our weekend family dinners. There was something profoundly healing in watching him move through my home with such ease, no longer a visitor but family reclaiming shared space. "How's the stream project coming along?" I asked. Thomas had been working to restore the stream on his property, clearing years of debris and creating small pools for wildlife. Almost done. I found a few old stone slabs in the woods that make perfect bridges. Lucas and I installed them yesterday. Dad's building me a reading platform in the big oak tree, Lucas added, carefully trimming a tulip stem as I'd shown him. It's not as big as our treehouse, but it has a special holder for my books and a pulley for my snacks. That sounds wonderful. I smiled at Thomas over Lucas's head. Your father always loved high places. He used to climb the maple tree in our backyard and read for hours. Really? Lucas looked at Thomas with newfound appreciation. Thomas nodded, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. Your grandmother would pack me a lunch in a bucket that I'd haul up with a rope. I think I read the entire Hardy Boys series in that tree. These small revelations, the sharing of family stories, the rediscovery of connections, had become precious currency in our rebuilt relationship. Each one bridged the gap between past and present, helping Lucas understand his place in our family's continuum. The remaining guests arrived in quick succession: Olivia and Robert, then Marcus bearing a bottle of wine and freshly baked bread, and finally Sharon and Elena with a luscious-looking chocolate cake. The house filled with conversation and laughter as everyone settled in the living room with appetizers. I hung back in the kitchen for a moment, taking in the scene. Lucas sprawled on the floor with Rusty, showing Elena his latest sketches. Thomas and Marcus deep in conversation about local fishing spots. Olivia helping Sharon arrange family photos on my newly installed digital frame. This gathering of people, some new to my life, some constants throughout, represented everything I'd built since that fateful day Thomas had asked me to leave my home. Not just a new house, but a new life. Not just financial security, but purpose. Need any help? Thomas appeared at my elbow, glass of wine in hand. Just enjoying the moment, I admitted. It's nice to have the house full. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. You've created something special here, Mom. Not just the property, the whole life. We've created something special, I corrected gently. This past year has been quite a journey for all of us. His expression turned reflective. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, how differently things could have gone. He glanced toward Lucas, now demonstrating to Elena how Rusty could high-five. If you hadn't won the lottery, if you hadn't stood your ground. But I did, and here we are. I squeezed his arm. No use dwelling on might-have-beens. I suppose not. He took a sip of wine. Still, I can't help but feel I got lucky. I didn't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Thomas. It's a gift, freely given. I smiled up at him. Besides, I think we've all grown from this experience. Even me. Especially you, he countered with a grin. From soft-spoken retiree to community foundation. Creator and board member extraordinaire, Dad would be so proud. The mention of Harold brought a bittersweet pang. He would be proud of you too, you know. The changes you've made, how you've prioritized Lucas. Thomas looked down, emotion flickering across his face. I hope so. I was about to respond when Lucas appeared at our sides. Grandma, Mr. Reynolds? Says dinner smells amazing and we're all starving. Can we eat now? Dinner was a joyous affair, conversation flowing as freely as the wine. Marcus regaled the table with stories from his teaching days, while Sharon shared news about the community, Center's expanded programs, made possible in part by my anonymous donations. Lucas, allowed to stay up later than usual for the celebration, basked in the adult attention, especially when Thomas announced that his baseball team had made the local finals. Thanks to Coach Reynolds, Lucas added, grinning at Marcus. He's been helping me with my batting. I glanced between Lucas and Marcus with surprise. This was the first I'd heard of any baseball connection between them. Marcus caught my look and smiled. I run into this young slugger and his dad at the park sometimes. Turns out I still remember a few tricks from my college days. Thomas nodded. Marcus has been a godsend. My baseball skills peaked in Little League. "You should come watch me play, Grandma," Lucas said around a mouthful of ham. "Our championship game is next Saturday." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I promised. After dinner, the party moved to the back patio, where the evening air was soft with spring fragrance. Sharon and Elena excused themselves early, citing an early morning commitment, but the others lingered, sipping coffee and sharing stories as twilight deepened around us. Lucas eventually succumbed to exhaustion, curling up on the porch swing with Rusty. Thomas carried him up to his room, the dog following faithfully behind. "Those two are quite a pair," Olivia observed, watching them go. "Lucas seems so much happier than when I saw him last fall." "He's thriving," I agreed. "The move to Oak Ridge has been good for both him and Thomas." "And for you," she added with a knowing smile. "I haven't seen you this content since Harold was alive." Her observation gave me pause. Was I content? The word seemed insufficient for the complex tapestry of emotions that comprised my life now. There was joy, certainly, in my reconciliation with Thomas and my relationship with Lucas. There was satisfaction in my community work and the foundation I'd established. But there was also a quiet pride in my independence, in the life I'd built from the ashes of rejection. "I'm grateful," I said finally, "for all of it, even the painful parts." Olivia squeezed my hand wordlessly, understanding, as only an old friend could. Later, after the guests had departed and Thomas had returned from putting Lucas to bed, we sat alone on the patio, the garden bathed in moonlight. Cicadas provided a rhythmic backdrop to our conversation, punctuated by the occasional hoot of an owl. "I have something to tell you," Thomas said, breaking a comfortable silence. "I've been offered a position on the town council. Carol Jenkins is retiring mid-term, and they need someone to fill her seat until the next election." "Thomas, that's wonderful," I exclaimed. "Will you accept?" He nodded, a shy pride in his expression. "I think so. It's only a part-time commitment, so it won't interfere with my practice or time with Lucas. And it feels right somehow. Giving back to Oak Ridge. Your father served on the council for years," I reminded him. "He always said it was the most rewarding work of his life outside of medicine. I know. That's part of why I want to do it." Thomas glanced at me. "The other part is you." "Me?" "Seeing how you've integrated yourself into this community, the center, your foundation, even your friendship with Marcus and his conservation group. You didn't just build a house here, Mom. You built connections." He smiled softly. "I want that too. For me and for Lucas." Warmth spread through me at his words. This was more than reconciliation. It was Thomas finding his own path to meaning and purpose, inspired in part by my example. "The council would be lucky to have you," I said sincerely. We sat in companionable silence for a while longer, listening to the night sounds, until Thomas checked his watch with a sigh. "I should get Lucas home. He has a math test tomorrow." "Why not stay?" I suggested impulsively. "It's late and Lucas is already asleep. The guest rooms are always ready." Thomas hesitated, then nodded. "That would be nice, actually, thanks." As I prepared for bed an hour later, I found myself reflecting on the evening, not just the celebration dinner, but the quiet conversation with Thomas afterward. In those moments, something had shifted between us, a final settling into our new roles. Not just mother and son, but two adults building parallel lives, supporting and inspiring each other. The next morning dawned clear and bright. I rose early, as was my habit, and was surprised to find Thomas already in the garden, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint the sky in delicate pinks and golds. "You're up with the birds," I commented, joining him with my own coffee. "Couldn't sleep past 5. Too many thoughts." He smiled ruefully. "The town council position mostly. I'm excited but nervous." "That's natural. New beginnings are always a bit frightening." He nodded, sipping his coffee. I've been thinking about the house in Pine Valley too. My realtor found a potential buyer, a young family with 3 kids. The house in Pine Valley. My former home, the one Thomas and Vanessa had taken over, the one from which I'd been evicted. Through the divorce proceedings, Thomas had been awarded the property, a fact that had surprised us both given Vanessa's tenacious fight for it. "How do you feel about selling it?" I asked carefully. He was quiet for a moment, weighing his response. Relieved, honestly. Too many ghosts there, too many mistakes. He glanced at me. "Does that seem wrong to you? It was your home for so long." I considered the question, searching my heart for any lingering attachment to the house where I'd raised my family, where Harold and I had built our life together. To my mild surprise, I found none. "That chapter of our lives is closed," I said. "Finally. The memories came with me. The rest is just structure." Thomas's shoulders relaxed, as if my blessing had lifted a weight. "The family seems nice. He's a music teacher at the high school. She runs an online graphic design business. The kids are 7, 5, and 2. It sounds like a perfect match," I smiled. "A house needs children to truly be a home." We fell, silent, watching as the sun crested the horizon fully, casting long shadows across the dewy grass. Lucas was still asleep upstairs, Rusty curled at the foot of his bed. This peaceful moment, mother and son sharing quiet coffee at dawn, would have seemed impossible a year ago. "Mom?" Thomas's voice was hesitant. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you, about the lottery winnings." I tensed slightly, old wariness resurfacing. "Oh?" "I know I said I didn't want any part of it, that I needed to rebuild on my own terms. And I meant that." He turned to face me fully. "But I've been thinking about Lucas's future. College, graduate school maybe?" "I've already established a trust for him," I reminded gently. "I know, and I'm incredibly grateful. But there's more to securing his future than just education." Thomas took a deep breath. "I'd like your help setting up a foundation, a small one, focused on environmental conservation. Lucas is so passionate about nature, about protecting the stream and the forests. I want to nurture that, to show him that we can make a real difference." The request caught me by surprise. Not because it was financial, though that was part of it, but because it represented something profound. Thomas asking not for himself, but for a legacy he wanted to build with his son. "A conservation foundation," I repeated, turning the idea over in my mind. "Focused on Oak Ridge?" He nodded eagerly. "To start with, yes. The town has those wetlands on the north side that developers have been eyeing, and the old forest behind the high school. Marcus mentioned they're both at risk." "Marcus would know," I agreed. My neighbor had become increasingly involved in local conservation efforts, leveraging his background in environmental science. "Have you discussed this with him?" "Briefly. He thinks it has potential, especially if we partner with the school system. Get kids involved in citizen science projects, restoration work." The enthusiasm in Thomas's voice was contagious. I could envision it clearly. Not just the foundation itself, but what it represented. Thomas putting down roots in Oak Ridge, creating something meaningful with Lucas, building connections to the community that would last a lifetime. "I think it's a wonderful idea," I said warmly. "I'd be honored to help." His face lit up. "Really? You don't think I'm overreaching or—" "I think you're being a thoughtful father and a good citizen," I interrupted. "We'll talk to Jennifer next week. She can advise us on the best structure." Thomas impulsively hugged me, a gesture so reminiscent of his boyhood that it brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thanks, Mom. This means a lot." "To me, too," I whispered, returning the embrace. A sleepy voice broke the moment. "Dad? Grandma? Why are you up so early?" We turned to find Lucas standing in the doorway, Rusty at his side, both looking rumpled and confused. "Just enjoying the sunrise," Thomas explained, extending an arm to include his son in our circle. "And making plans." "What kind of plans?" Lucas yawned, leaning against his father. Thomas met my eyes over Lucas's head, a shared understanding passing between us. "Big ones," he said simply. "The kind that will make a difference. I'll tell you all about it over breakfast." Inside, as I prepared French toast while Thomas and Lucas set the table, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, far from it, but the closing of a circle, the fulfillment of a journey that had begun with loss, but culminated in something far richer than what had been taken. The lottery win had changed my external circumstances dramatically, but the true transformation had been in what money could never buy. My own strength, rediscovered, my son's character, tested and ultimately deepened, my grandson's security, preserved through our collective love. As we gathered around the table, sunlight streaming through the windows, I silently thanked whatever twist of fate had guided my hand to purchase that lottery ticket on that ordinary day nearly a year ago. Not for the millions it had brought, but for the truth it had revealed about what truly mattered, and the future it had made possible for us all. Autumn had returned to Oak Ridge, painting the Henderson estate in fiery hues of crimson and gold. 1 year had passed since that fateful day when my son had placed my belongings on the sidewalk. 1 full cycle of seasons since my life had been uprooted and replanted in soil I never could have imagined. Today marked another milestone, the official launch of the Wilson Family Scholarship Foundation. The community center's main hall had been transformed for the occasion, decorated with flowers from my garden and photographs of Oak Ridge's first 5 scholarship recipients. Young faces full of promise gazed out from elegant frames, their futures forever altered by what the lottery had made possible. I stood at the refreshment table, arranging a platter of petit fours, when Sharon appeared at my elbow. "The mayor just arrived," she murmured, "and the newspaper reporter wants a photo of you with the recipients." "Just make sure they spell my name correctly this time," I replied with a smile. Last month's article about the community center's expansion had identified me as Eleonora, much to Lucas's amusement. Sharon squeezed my arm affectionately. "Hard to believe it's only been a year since you walked through our doors looking for volunteer work. Now look at you, our biggest benefactor and board president." I felt a flush of pleasure at her words. The community center had blossomed under our joint leadership, expanding from basic after-school programs to include adult education classes, senior services, and a thriving arts initiative. My financial contributions had provided the resources, but it was the dedication of people like Sharon that had transformed vision into reality. "Eleanor," Olivia's voice carried across the room as she navigated through the growing crowd. "The place looks amazing, and I just met that young woman who's going to medical school. Sophia? What a remarkable girl." "All 5 recipients are exceptional," I agreed. The selection committee had a difficult task. Sophia Rodriguez was perhaps the most compelling of our inaugural scholars, the daughter of migrant workers who had settled in Oak Ridge, working multiple jobs to help support her family, while maintaining perfect grades. Her acceptance to medical school had been a triumph tempered only by financial reality, until our foundation had stepped in. "Thomas is parking the car," Olivia continued. "He had to take a call from a client. Lucas is with him, wearing what appears to be half the contents of your garden on his new suit." I laughed, picturing my grandson's inevitable encounter with nature. Some things never change. Harold could never keep Thomas clean at formal events either. The mention of my late husband brought a momentary pang. How proud he would have been of this foundation bearing his name, of the renewed connection between Thomas and his hometown, of Lucas's budding interest in medicine. Not for the first time, I wished Harold could have witnessed the unexpected blessings that had emerged from what had initially seemed like tragedy. The hall continued to fill with Oak Ridge residents, teachers, business owners, healthcare workers, retirees, all gathered to celebrate the foundation's launch and meet the scholarship recipients. Marcus arrived with his conservation group colleagues, their easy camaraderie evident as they clustered near the display about our newest initiative, the Oak Ridge Environmental Education Project. True to his word, Thomas had established the conservation foundation he'd envisioned during our spring sunrise conversation. With my financial backing and Marcus's expertise, the project had quickly gained momentum, protecting crucial habitats while engaging local schools in hands-on environmental education. Lucas had thrown himself into the work with characteristic enthusiasm, becoming something of a mascot for the conservation team. "There you are." Thomas's voice interrupted my thoughts. He approached with Lucas in tow, both looking handsome in their suits despite Lucas's grass-stained knees. "Sorry we're late. The closing on the Pine Valley house ran longer than expected." "It's officially sold?" I asked, straightening Lucas's crooked tie. Thomas nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Keys handed over, papers signed. The Barnes family moves in next week." A chapter truly closed, I thought, feeling a curious lightness. The house that had once been the center of so much pain was now destined for new beginnings, a young family creating their own memories within its walls. "Can I go find Mr. Reynolds?" Lucas asked, already scanning the crowd for Marcus. "I want to show him my science project photos." "Go ahead," Thomas agreed. "But no running indoors, remember?" Lucas was off like a shot, walking with exaggerated restraint until he was out of his father's sight, then breaking into a barely disguised trot. Thomas and I exchanged knowing smiles. "He's been talking about nothing but the stream restoration all week," Thomas said fondly. "Marcus has created a monster." "A passionate environmentalist," I corrected. "There are worse things to become." "True." Thomas surveyed the crowded hall with evident pride. "This is quite something, Mom. Dad would have been speechless." "Not speechless," I countered with a smile. "He would have given one of his infamous impromptu speeches that started with just a few words and ended half an hour later." Thomas laughed, the sound warming my heart. These shared memories of Harold had become precious currency between us, a way of keeping him present in our rebuilt family. The formal program began promptly at 7. As board president, I welcomed the attendees and introduced each scholarship recipient, sharing their remarkable stories and future plans. When Sofia Rodriguez took the podium to speak about her journey from the fields where her parents had labored to the medical career she was now pursuing, there wasn't a dry eye in the hall. "My parents taught me that education is the one thing nobody can take from you," she said, her voice strong despite her evident emotion. "The Wilson Family Scholarship has given me not just financial support, but something equally important: belief." Someone looked at me and said, "Your dreams matter. That changes everything." Her words resonated deeply with me. Belief, the currency of human potential, something Thomas had temporarily withdrawn from me, and that I had found within myself during those dark days after my eviction. Something I now had the privilege of offering to others. After the formal presentations, as guests mingled and congratulated the recipients, Jennifer, my financial advisor, appeared at my side. "Magnificent event," she said, champagne flute in hand. "And perfect timing. The new investment portfolio is outperforming our projections. We can expand to 7 scholarships next year if you'd like. Let's discuss it at our next meeting," I replied, touched by her enthusiasm. Jennifer had become more than an advisor. She was a friend and ally in my philanthropic efforts. For now, let's enjoy this milestone. As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn to the display showcasing the environmental education project. Lucas had stationed himself beside it, earnestly explaining to anyone who would listen about the importance of riparian buffers and native plant species. Marcus stood nearby, interjecting occasionally, but mostly allowing Lucas to shine. "You've created quite the junior conservationist," I commented, joining them as Lucas dashed off to share his expertise with another guest. Marcus smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "He's a natural. Reminds me of myself at that age. Endless questions, boundless energy. Thank you for nurturing his interest. It means a lot to Thomas and me." "My pleasure. Though I should be thanking you. The project wouldn't exist without your support." He hesitated, then added more softly, "Neither would a lot of good things in Oak Ridge these days." Something in his tone made me glance up sharply. The expression in his eyes, warm, appreciative, with a hint of something more, sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. At 61, I had assumed such sensations were behind me, relegated to memories of my younger self. Yet here they were, awakened by this kind, thoughtful man who had become an increasingly important presence in my life. Before I could respond, Lucas reappeared, tugging at my hand. "Grandma? Dad says it's time for the cake. The big one from Maggie's Bakery with the foundation logo." The moment with Marcus dissolved as I allowed myself to be pulled toward the refreshment area, where a magnificent 3-tiered cake awaited unveiling. Yet the warm impression lingered, a small ember of possibility tucked away for later consideration. The cake-cutting ceremony, led by the mayor and the scholarship recipients, provided a jubilant conclusion to the formal event. As guests began to depart, offering congratulations and well wishes, I found myself standing with Thomas near the entrance, thanking attendees. "Eleanor, what a wonderful contribution to our community." Mrs. Abernathy, my former next-door neighbor from Pine Valley, grasped my hands warmly. "When I think how worried we all were about you after that dreadful business with the house." She cast a reproving glance at Thomas, who had the grace to look abashed. "Well, just look at you now. A perfect example of living well being the best. Revenge." After she bustled away, Thomas turned to me with a rueful expression. "I deserved that." "Ancient history," I assured him, patting his arm. "And not entirely accurate." "Oh? This," I gestured around the hall, at the scholarship recipients chatting animatedly with community members, at Lucas proudly showing his conservation photos to his teacher, at the foundation logo displayed prominently on the stage. None of this was about revenge. It was about rebuilding, creating something meaningful from what was broken. Thomas's expression softened. "You always could find the lesson in everything, Mom. Even my worst mistakes." "Especially those," I teased, lightening the moment. "They're particularly instructive." The hall gradually emptied, leaving only the core planning committee for cleanup. Lucas, exhausted from his role as unofficial ambassador, had fallen asleep on a sofa in the back office. Rusty, who had been smuggled in after the formal program, curled protectively at his feet. "I'll take him home," Thomas offered, lifting his sleeping son with practiced ease. "Unless you need help here?" "We've got it covered," Sharon assured him. "Go on. It's been a long day for everyone." After Thomas departed with Lucas, I joined, the volunteers in straightening the hall, collecting leftover programs, and rearranging furniture. Physical work felt good after the emotional intensity of the evening, a grounding counterpoint to the soaring feelings of accomplishment and pride. "Penny for your thoughts," Marcus said, appearing beside me as I folded the last tablecloth. The others had finished and departed, leaving us alone in the quiet hall. "Just reflecting on the journey," I replied, smoothing the crisp linen with my palms. "From that day on the sidewalk to tonight, it's been extraordinary." "I'd say so." Marcus helped me stack the folded cloth with the others. "You've accomplished more in 1 year than most people do in a decade." "Not alone," I pointed out. "I've had help. Support." I met his gaze. Friends who appeared exactly when I needed them. Something shifted in the air between us, a subtle change in pressure, in possibility. Marcus took a half step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "Eleanor," he began, then seemed to reconsider his words. "I've been wanting to ask you something." My heart gave a ridiculous little jump. "Yes?" "The conservation group is hosting a weekend retreat at Lakeside Park next month. Planning sessions, nature walks, some evening programs around the campfire." He cleared his throat. "I'd be honored if you'd consider attending, as my guest." The invitation hung in the air, its underlying meaning clear. This wasn't just about conservation work. It was an opening, an exploration of the connection that had been building between us over months of shared projects, casual dinners, and easy conversations. "I'd like that," I said simply, feeling a bloom of warmth at his relieved smile. "Excellent. I'll send you the details." He glanced at his watch. "It's getting late. May I walk you to your car?" Outside, the October evening had turned crisp. Stars, sharp points of light in the clear sky. As we walked across the community center parking lot, Marcus offered his arm, a courtly gesture that made me smile as I slipped my hand into the crook of his elbow. "Thank you for tonight," he said as we reached my car. "Not just for the foundation launch, but for including the environmental project. It means a great deal to me." "The project was Thomas's vision," I reminded him. "I just provided the means." "And the heart," he added softly, "like you do with everything." Our eyes met in the gentle glow of the parking lot lights. For a suspended moment, I felt the weight of potential between us, the possibility of something new, unexpected, and lovely. Then Marcus leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on my cheek, his lips warm against my skin. "Good night, Eleanor," he murmured, stepping back with a smile. "Drive safely." "Good night, Marcus." As I drove home through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge, my cheeks still tingling from the kiss, I felt a curious lightness in my chest. Not the giddy excitement of youth, but something richer. A mature appreciation for life's unexpected gifts, for the possibility of companionship I had never thought to find again after Harold. The Henderson estate was bathed in moonlight when I arrived, security lights illuminating the driveway as I approached. Inside, the house welcomed me with familiar comfort. The subtle scent of lilacs from the arrangement in the foyer, the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the soft glow of the lamps I'd left on in anticipation of my return. I moved through the rooms, turning off lights, checking locks, performing the nighttime rituals that had become second nature. In Lucas's room, I straightened the already tidy bedding, smiling at the collection of rocks and feathers arranged carefully on his bookshelf, treasures from his explorations with Marcus and Thomas. In my study, I paused before the framed drawing that had been Lucas's first gift to me. Two figures standing beside a house with an enormous garden. The childish rendering had proven remarkably prescient. Here we were, in a house with gardens even more magnificent than his imagination had conjured. Our family reforged through trials into something stronger, more authentic than before. My phone chimed with a text message as I was preparing for Thomas. Lucas woke up just long enough to declare tonight the best party ever and demand I text you goodnight. So, good night from both of us. And Mom? Dad would have been so proud today. I texted back a quick reply, heart full. Then, on impulse, I opened my photo gallery and scrolled back to the beginning, to the images I'd taken that first week after winning the lottery. Photos of the tiny Sunnyside apartment, of the barren community center classroom where I'd first volunteered, of the Henderson estate when it was still overgrown and neglected. The contrast between those images and the life I now lived was stark. Yet the transformation hadn't been instantaneous. It had unfolded day by day, choice by choice, relationship by relationship. The money had provided opportunity, but it was the decisions I'd made to volunteer, to forgive, to rebuild that had created this new life. I thought of Sofia Rodriguez's words at the ceremony. Someone looked at me and said, "Your dreams matter." In my case, I had been that someone for myself. When Thomas and Vanessa had dismissed me as irrelevant, when my home had been taken and my role diminished, I had affirmed my own worth. The lottery win had given me resources, but the strength had come from within. My reverie was interrupted by another text message chime. This one from Marcus. "Home safely? Just checking." I smiled, typing back. "Safe and sound. Thank you for asking." 3 dots appeared, indicating he was composing a response. Then, "I'm looking forward to the retreat. Good night, Eleanor." Such a simple exchange, yet it carried the weight of new beginnings, of doors opening where I had assumed all possibilities were closed. Life, it seemed, was not finished surprising me yet. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows in golden rivers. I rose early, as was my habit, and made my way to the greenhouse for my morning ritual of tending the plants. The air inside was humid and fragrant, alive with growing things. As I moved among the planters, checking soil moisture and removing yellowed leaves, my mind drifted to the year behind and the year ahead. The Scholarship Foundation was launched, 5 promising young lives set on new trajectories. The environmental project was thriving, protecting precious habitats while engaging the community's children. Thomas had found his footing in Oak Ridge, his law practice growing steadily as his reputation for integrity and fair dealing spread. And Lucas, my bright, curious grandson, was flourishing in this nurturing environment, secure in the knowledge that he was loved, valued, and belonged. The confused, hurt boy who had once parroted Vanessa's cruel words to me had been replaced by a confident child with deep connections to family and community. As for me, I had discovered capacities within myself I had never suspected, for leadership, for vision, for building something meaningful from adversity. And perhaps, I thought with a small smile as Marcus's invitation returned to mind, for new chapters of personal happiness as well. The greenhouse door opened, admitting a gust of cool morning air and an excited voice. "Grandma, we're here." I turned to find Lucas bounding toward me, Rusty at his heels, Thomas following at a more sedate pace with a cardboard bakery box. "This is a surprise," I said, accepting Lucas's enthusiastic hug. "I didn't expect you until dinner." "Dad said we should bring you breakfast because you worked so hard on the party," Lucas explained, peering interestedly at a tray of seedlings. "We got those cinnamon rolls you like from Patterson's." "How thoughtful," I smiled at Thomas over Lucas's head. "What's the occasion?" Thomas set the bakery box on a potting bench. "Do we need an occasion to have breakfast with you?" "Not at all. Let me finish up here and we'll go inside." Lucas tugged at my sleeve. "Can I help?" "Dad says I have a green thumb like you." "Absolutely." I handed him a small watering can. These seedlings need a gentle drink. While Lucas carefully watered the trays, Thomas wandered to the far end of the greenhouse where the orchids were displayed, their exotic blooms adding splashes of vibrant color among the greenery. "These are new," he commented, indicating a cluster of lady slippers I'd recently acquired. "A gift from Marcus," I explained, joining him, "from his trip to the botanical exhibition in Portland." Thomas raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile playing at his lips. "Marcus seems to be bringing you a lot of plants lately." I felt a faint flush rise to my cheeks. "He knows I enjoy them." "Mm-hmm." Thomas's smile widened. "Lucas mentioned you two have been having dinner together, regularly." "We share interests," I replied, attempting dignity despite my warming face. "The environmental project, the community center." "Of course." Thomas's expression turned more serious. "He's a good man, Mom. Dad would want you to be happy, you know." The simple statement, his blessing really, touched me deeply. "It's very early days," I cautioned. "Just friendship, with perhaps the possibility of more." "Well, for what it's worth, Lucas adores him. And Thomas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I respect him, his integrity, his commitment to this community. If friendship does become more, you have my full support. Emotion tightened my throat. After everything, the eviction, the revelations, the painful rebuilding of trust, here was my son, offering his blessing for a new chapter in my life. Not because he felt obligated, but because he genuinely cared for my happiness. "Thank you," I managed, squeezing his hand. "That means a great deal to me." "Grandma, I finished the watering," Lucas called from across the greenhouse, breaking the emotional moment. "Can we eat now? I'm starving." Thomas and I exchanged amused glances. "Some things never change," he murmured as we turned toward the door, always led by his stomach. In the kitchen, as we enjoyed the still warm cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee, Lucas regaled us with his plans for the conservation club he was starting at school. His enthusiasm was infectious, his face animated as he described the projects he envisioned. "Mr. Reynolds says we could adopt a section of the stream for monitoring," he explained between bites. "We'd check water quality and count species and everything." "That sounds like an excellent project," I agreed, refilling Thomas's coffee cup. "Have you asked your principal about it yet?" Lucas nodded vigorously. "Yesterday. She said as long as we have adult supervisors, we can do it." "I've volunteered for supervisor duty," Thomas admitted with a grin. "My new paralegal can handle things at the office one afternoon a week." The conversation flowed easily as we finished. Breakfast, a comfortable family rhythm established over months of shared meals and experiences. When Lucas and Rusty raced outside to check if the treehouse had weathered yesterday's brief rain shower, Thomas lingered at the table, his expression thoughtful. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said, tracing the rim of his coffee cup with one finger. "The town council is considering naming the new park after Dad. Harold Wilson Memorial Park." Unexpected tears pricked at my eyes. "Oh, Thomas, he would have loved that." "It's not official yet. We vote next week, but the support seems strong." He looked up, his expression soft with memory. "Remember how he used to take me fishing at the old pond every Saturday? Rain or shine even, in winter. I remember packing thermoses of hot chocolate and listening to your fish stories when you came home." I smiled, the bittersweet ache of nostalgia washing through me. "He treasured those mornings with you." "I've started taking Lucas," Thomas admitted. "Not every weekend. He has too many activities. But when we can. It feels right somehow. Continuing the tradition." The revelation touched me deeply. This, more than any scholarship foundation or conservation project, was the true legacy. These threads of connection stretching from past to present to future, binding generations together in shared experience and love. Outside, Lucas's voice called excitedly for Thomas to come see something in the treehouse. Thomas drained his coffee cup and stood, smiling at the urgency in his son's tone. "Duty calls," he said lightly. "Thanks for breakfast, and for last night. The foundation launch was perfect." After he left to join Lucas, I remained at the kitchen table, gazing out at the autumn garden where gold and crimson leaves drifted lazily to the ground. From this vantage point, I could see the treehouse nestled in the sturdy oak, Thomas and Lucas now visible on its platform, heads bent together over some discovery. 1 year. Such a brief span in the grand scheme of a life. Yet within it, I had lost and found myself, rediscovered my son, strengthened my bond with my grandson, and opened myself to new possibilities of friendship and perhaps even love, all because of a lottery ticket and the painful revelation it had triggered about my son's true character. Would I change it if I could? Erase the hurt of that day on the sidewalk, the rejection, the cruel words? The question gave me pause. Without that catalyst, would Thomas have recognized the flaws in his marriage, in his priorities? Would Lucas have formed the deep bond he now shared with both his father and me? Would I have discovered my own strength, my capacity for building a meaningful life independently? Perhaps not. Sometimes the breaking had to precede the rebuilding. Sometimes loss cleared the ground for new growth. Through the window, I watched as Thomas helped Lucas hang a new sign on the treehouse, a carved wooden plaque they had made together in Thomas's workshop. Even from this distance, I could make out the words, Wilson Family Observatory. Family. After everything, that was what remained. Not the same family we had been before. We were all changed by what had happened. But something perhaps stronger, more authentic for having been tested and rebuilt. The lottery win had given me financial freedom, yes. But the true wealth lay in these relationships, in this hard-won wisdom, in the knowledge that I was more resilient than I had ever imagined. That knowledge could never be taken from me, no matter what the future might hold. Outside, leaves continued to fall, golden in the autumn sunlight. Inside, I gathered the breakfast dishes, humming softly to myself. Beyond the windows, my son and grandson waved from their perch among the branches, inviting me to join their adventure. I waved back, smiling, already reaching for my sweater. Whatever came next, whether quiet joy or unexpected challenge, I would face it with the strength I had discovered within myself. The strength that had always been there, waiting for the moment when I needed it most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.